Hello, everyone. So my name is Stuart Dietzman. I'm very excited to be introducing you guys to psychedelics across the lifespan. That's my presentation, and I'm very excited to be covering this material and looking into this. I'm just very interested in this subject and think it holds an incredible amount of promise as far as future therapies go. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So what are psychedelics? So psychedelics are a hallucinogenic class of psychoactive drug whose primary effect is to trigger non-ordinary states of consciousness and psychedelic experiences via serotonin 2A receptor agonism. This causes specific psychological, visual, and auditory changes, and often a substantially altered state of consciousness. So substantially altered state of consciousness being a key here. Here are the most common, or a few, there's several more examples. These are the most common examples of psychedelic that we'll be covering in this presentation. So there's psilocybin, which is the active ingredient of magic mushrooms. Dimethyltryptamine, short acronym is DMT. And then lysergic acid diethylamide, which is LSD or acid. And I have this picture here next to the serotonin molecule, so y'all can see that molecularly, the construction is pretty similar to serotonin. They do, in fact, attach to the serotonin 5-HT2 alpha receptors. They're agonists for that. And that's how they work, or at least part of how they work. So then psilocybin, as you see, is the magic mushrooms. There's hundreds of different psychoactive species of mushrooms. They're in existence. They can be found out in the wild. DMT is either, you can have it, there's a pure form that people can smoke, or it can be injected intravenously, as it's been done in some research. But I think the most famous example are these ayahuasca ceremonies that the indigenous people of Peru have been doing for thousands of years, and lately, or at least the past few years, has become very popular for Westerners, some of what you see in this photo, to travel to Peru to take part in the ceremonies. And then, of course, there's LSD or acid, which I think a lot of people associate or know it has to do with the counterculture movement of the 60s. Kind of fueled that whole movement. So back to this altered state of consciousness. So consciousness, in a way, is the only game in town. I mean, everything you experience is at its most fundamental, really just an appearance in consciousness. The sound of my voice is appearing in your consciousness. The visuals of this presentation appearing in your consciousness. The room you're in, as you look around it, is appearing in your consciousness. Everything you experience is a appearance in consciousness. And in many ways, the brain is always hallucinating. It's hallucinating your reality. This exact experience at this exact moment is your brain hallucinating, sort of creating your reality, which is how you as an organism then navigate through life and hopefully pass on your genes. So, which brings us to psychedelics and this substantial change of consciousness, because basically, within a few minutes or a few hours consuming, depending on which substance the participant takes, they are no longer in the world as they know it. Things look a little different. They are definitely not in Kansas anymore. So I would highly suggest looking up this TED Talk, Your Brain Hallucination Consciousness, to get a better picture of what I just briefly explained, because I think it's quite interesting and pretty informative. So how do psychedelics work? Well, for one, there is this, they reduce brain activity, which the early researchers who started this were the first people to put somebody under an fMRI and see what their brain looked like on psychedelics, in this case, psilocybin. They were expecting increased brain activity. It just seemed, the experience is so intense. They expected just brain activity to sort of correlate with that or match that. But it was actually the opposite. There is less brain activity, a significant decrease in brain activity while on a psychedelic. And this is actually matches, it's very similar to a REM sleep. So basically a dream state. And also children in the age of 2, their brains look a lot like the brains of an adult on a psychedelic, which I thought was pretty funny. Everybody jokes around about how little kids in the age of 2, it's like they're drunk. Well, they're not drunk. They're just tripping. So here are some brain images, sort of providing a good visual from the study I just posted. So the red is normal consciousness. This is how your brain is normally looking with a placebo, or in this case, a placebo in the research. And then the blue is your brain on psilocybin. As you can see, noticeably, just from a visual, you can see the decreased activity throughout the brain. And that's because, I mean, the brain is really, what the brain is mostly doing is filtering out sensation in order to create the picture that is your conscious reality and what you're experiencing. So on psilocybin, that sort of filtering operation has been, as you see, heavily diminished. And this is particularly pronounced in the default mode network of the brain. Now, the default mode network is part of the brain that really seems to support the ego or the sense of self. It's also been sort of there's connections like some disturbances of the default mode network have been connected to depression, anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorder. And the default mode network is really where your brain can travel. You can time travel. You can think into the future. You can think into the past. You can make judgments and come up with inferences in the present moment. And that sort of ability to imagine, I mean, it's almost like the part of the brain that really helps your imagination or powers your imagination. That has been decreased. So, I mean, this might be a good thing if we always people say like, well, I just feel like I'm really in my head lately on this subject. I'm overthinking it, or I'm stressed out. I've just been overthinking it. Well, on this substance, on these LSD, psilocybin, and these other and DMT, that whole network of the brain is really the activity there is very heavily suppressed. This was a cool study as well. Somebody combined psilocybin with meditation basically and found, again, a very decreased amount of activity in the default mode network and some lasting changes, a decrease in stress overall after the experiences. So then there's also this issue of neural connectivity. While on the substances, there is a very significant increase in neural connectivity. Perfectly explained. I mean, this picture does it better than my words can. As you can see, your brain on the left there is your normal consciousness, and on the right, you see your brain on psilocybin. As you can see, there's a lot going on. Lots of parts of the brain that don't normally fire together are firing together. This is sort of what I think causes the experience of hearing visuals and seeing sounds that a lot of people describe while on these drugs. And as well as just the ability to sort of get inferences that are outside of your belief system, look at problems in a new way. So what are the effects of this across the lifespan? Well, we've all pretty much been familiarized with Erik Erikson's psychosocial developmental theory. We've been talking about it a lot during this class. And at the age of 65 and older, where we currently are, there is integrity versus despair. Integrity just basically meaning coming to the end of your life and you're satisfied with your life. And you feel good about what you've accomplished and you're ready, pretty much ready for the end. Versus despair, where you're filled with a lot of regret and you have a lot of negative thoughts about what you accomplished in your time on this earth. So, which leads us to the study that really started all this research to begin with. At Johns Hopkins, they had a lot of very clinically depressed and a lot of people suffering from death anxiety who were on their deathbeds, basically dying of cancer. And their conditions were treatment resistant. I mean, no amount of SSRIs or benzos seemed to help them. So they decided to throw a Hail Mary as far as research goes and try psilocybin. As you can see, psilocybin produces substantial sustained decrease in depression, anxiety in patients with life-threatening cancer. Here's some scales here that really show this off very well. I think you see, I think it's clear that the drugs seem to win for the patient, that integrity versus despair conflict. I really sort of give them a feeling of integrity. You see, it only took one dose too, which is a really interesting thing. You see the red line is the high dose and the blue line is the low dose. And as you can see, all the way up until 6 months out from the treatment, a major decrease in depression and anxiety, as well as an increase in quality of life and acceptance of death. So just huge, huge results here. Really, really shook up the scene as far as the research goes. So lasting personality changes. Now, this is interesting. So it seems that no matter where you are in your lifespan, consumption of these drugs can change your personality in some positive ways. So this is a study that was done on treatment-resistant depression, but they also took some measurements of personality. This is one of many studies. I just picked one as an example. So as you see in the outcome, the personality trait neuroticism decreased, while traits extroversion, conscientiousness, and openness all increased in the baseline up into the 3-month follow-up. So very impressive. And throughout these studies, one of the most common is the openness. And that seems to be the most reliable one. I mean, these drugs seem to make people less closed-minded. It makes you more open to new experiences. And I think the neuroticism, I think emotional stability is also a very useful one that comes out of these experiences. I mean, I think everybody would like to be a little less neurotic, and it just makes your life better. So future research. Lots of studies being done right now, depression, anxiety, OCD, with these drugs, and they're all in process at the moment. So hopefully, I think within a year or two, there's going to be, I mean, a ton of research coming out. And as far as, especially for future therapies and use in a therapeutic setting, I mean, there's one company that's working on a drug that will shut off an LSD trip. So you can imagine setting down the client, they take the LSD, you guide them through a therapeutic session, and then that hour ends, they can take the medication and it will end the trip, which would be pretty useful, you know. There's also the study of consciousness in general. I think this is the most exciting part, like using the drugs to sort of reverse engineer consciousness. There's a lot of research we're currently working on. I think as we explore what these drugs do to the mind, that's going to tell us a lot about consciousness and hopefully answer some questions about that very essential mystery of the human experience. So that's my presentation. And like I said, I'm very excited about this research, and I hope that we all, I mean, maybe we have, those of us who are going to research have a chance to contribute. And I think that this research will lead to a brighter and trippier future, and I'm very excited. I hope for a lively discussion in the comments. Please ask questions. I've done a lot of research into this and would love to talk about it with you guys. So appreciate it. Look forward to talking to y'all.